Britain's most senior soldier in Afghanistan has warned the country must not be abandoned after security is handed over to Afghan forces in 2014. Lieutenant General James Bucknell, who's Deputy Commander of ISAF, says the insurgents must not be allowed to wait out the campaign. The operation in Afghanistan also came under the scrutiny of MPs today. The head of the armed forces told the Defence Committee the mission's on track for handover, but he conceded there were intelligence failings back in 2006, meaning British troops faced a much fiercer fight than they expected. James Hurst was at the hearing.
Since last autumn's deal between NATO and Afghanistan, the focus has turned to 2014, when international troops should finish fighting and hand over to local forces. When that deal was done, it was also made clear there would be an enduring relationship of support for Afghanistan and its forces. General Bucknell's comments in an interview with The Guardian spell out a military case for politicians to stand by that commitment. He tells the paper, "The signal of a long-term commitment is an essential part of short-term success in the campaign." And on the short term, he says, what we have to do is show that we are making progress, which we are. Now is not the time to blink. Yet those comments come at a time when some in America are suggesting the death of Osama bin Laden means withdrawal could or should come quicker. Suggestions raised at today's Defence Committee meeting in Westminster.
Well, it is a hypothesis. I also picked up on the speculation about it, but the Secretary of State for Defence and I were in Washington 10 days ago. It was very clear there that no decision has yet been made, actually. So there is a lot of speculation. At my level, we're very clear that the strategy is sound and that we must give it proper opportunity to come to fruition.
Although today's hearing looked to the future, it was mostly focusing on the lessons of the past, from 2006 when British troops first went into Helmand. The generals were clear. Those troops faced a harder fight than they expected because there had been intelligence failings.
The crux of the problem was when we went into the north and arguably, turned up an hornet's nest. But no one would know that until you did it.
I wasn't in my list of things we did trying to in any way pretend that this wasn't a failure of intelligence. I mean, it clearly was. Reinforcing CDS's point, we had always anticipated, I think, Taliban potential intent. What we probably underestimated is their capacity.
But there were assurances that and other lessons had already been learnt.
Britain has the best force ratios in Afghanistan at the moment. Indeed, we're the envy of the Americans, which is worth reminding ourselves of, as they have a very difficult challenge, increasingly in the east of the country. Helicopters, I have no complaints at the moment. Kit, we can't get a complaint out of our soldiers about kit. I mean, when I see what they've got, I'm always embarrassed that they've got too much good kit.
In their evidence, there seemed to be a real drive from the generals to paint a picture of the Afghanistan campaign, and particularly the training of Afghan security forces, as being on track for the planned handover in 2014, but with it a note of caution that only time will tell if the progress made can be held and built on. James Hurst, Forces News, Westminster.
Well, it's been a busy day for the Defence Committee. This afternoon, the First Sea Lord told them he would have preferred the carrier fleet to have been retained rather than scrapped. Admiral Sir Mark Stanhope and the other two service chiefs were being grilled on the Defence Review. Tim Cooper was watching the proceedings. Tim, what were MPs keen to find out exactly?
Well, I think they were keen to find out two things, two broad areas really. Firstly, the impact that SDSR is having on current operations in Afghanistan and Libya. But first of all, let's talk about the stuff they wanted to know about how SDSR came about in the first place, whether defence chiefs were consulted, whether what they said was actually listened to, and quite robust questioning from the committee to the three senior service chiefs there. And also they asked the question, is there anything you'd like to revisit from SDSR if you could? And the most interesting answer came from the First Sea Lord, Admiral Sir Mark Stanhope, and it was about the carriers.
Difficult decision had to be made, but if you asked me for a wish, it would be nicer if we didn't
to have retained it rather than to have to regenerate it.
Absolutely.
So if we broaden the question, not into which bit of the SDSR would you revisit, but which bit of the combined SDSR and comprehensive spending review would you revisit? If there were one area, it would be to retain the carrier strike capability, would it?
Yes.
And Tim, the three defence chiefs were asked how SDSR is impacting on ongoing operations, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the MPs were trying to get one of them at least to say that they were overstretched in some way. Now, that's not something any of these three are going to say, but they did indicate fairly strongly for all three services that equipment and personnel are being pushed pretty hard. Here's the view of the Chief of the Air Staff, Sir Stephen Dalton.
We're not overstretched. There are times within this period, there are days where every available asset is being tasked, absolutely, and therefore we are asking a lot out of our people particularly, but also out of the assets we've got. But that is a question of doing day-to-day planning on priorities and working out where the priorities on that particular day.
Similar vein from the First Sea Lord as well, talking about the possibility of ongoing operations off Libya. And he said it would be difficult if they're expected to maintain the same tempo with frigates and mine hunters at the moment to continue work elsewhere in overseas operational areas.
All right, Tim, thank you for that.